Hello, friends. This is Keith Joseph from the Institute for Hermetic Studies. Today, I have a special guest, a fellow aspirant in the teacher certification program, Nicholas Kline. And we had been talking at the Institute's conference about the middle pillar, and I thought that Nicholas had some interesting insights. It's a practice that he's been working with for some time, and I thought it would be interesting and hopefully informative to discuss it with him. So, Nick, thanks for um, doing this with me, and I thought we could just jump right into it. So maybe you could kind of lay out the theory of the middle pillar, what it is we're talking about. This is a ritual that uh, Israel Regardie published at one point, and I believe you're working with the version that Mark Stavish um, developed a little further. So maybe you can just talk about that a little bit, and then we'll delve into it.
Yes, thank you, Keith. One of the critical things to understand about the middle pillar ritual, and this is consistent with all esoteric work, is to understand the function and the theory of the ritual work that you are doing, whether that is within a ceremonial magic system, an internal power system, or other forms of esoteric work. And the function of the middle pillar ritual is to be the primary power building exercise for the Golden Dawn system of ceremonial magic, as well as other systems that use the middle pillar ritual. And what that means for a system to have a power building ritual or a power building method is to contrast with the what can be referred to as borrowed power methods of a more direct ceremonial magic approach, where the forces that you are resonating with in the macrocosm, which can include different types of macrocosmic intelligences and spirits, such as the archangels of the four directions, are facilitating your esoteric development. With an internal power building system, what you are doing is you are developing your own ability to generate and channel the innate psychic energy within your microcosm. And I am not an expert on the history of the Golden Dawn and the development of the Middle Pillar ritual. What I do know about the Middle Pillar ritual's development was that Israel Regardie saw that there was a gap in the Golden Dawn system for the type of internal power development that I'm describing. And that is something that is very common and accessible in yogic systems in India, such as the practices of Kundalini yoga, or in the Taoist systems using the different chi circulation techniques. So Israel Regardie was wanting to develop a ritual practice that was consistent with the Golden Dawn system, consistent with their egregore, and was an option for developing internal power. So that is some of the background and the function of the middle pillar ritual. When you are practicing the middle pillar ritual, what you are doing is you can think of the different psychic energy centers that you are activating as Bob Smith has described, responding to the stress adaptation cycle, where you are pushing those psychic energy centers and their capacity to generate the energy that they resonate with, and then allowing them to rest and develop. And you continually repeat this process, which strengthens these psychic energy centers and their ability to generate the energy that they resonate with. And that would be the initial theory introduction, Keith. There is some more I can speak about the nature of the different psychic energy centers. Before I speak about that, is there anything you wanted to ask me about what I have said?
So that's really interesting comments, Nick. So maybe just we can delve in a little bit. You're contrasting the middle pillar ritual or exercise, which we'll describe in some detail further on. You're contrasting that with a kind of maybe a ceremonial magic ritual where you're invoking an outside force to assist you, whether it's with high magic or low magic, whatever it is. You're contrasting that with developing your own internal energies and powers, capacities. Do I understand what you're saying, right?
That is correct. And one of the important things to know is that most systems of esoteric development, will include both internal power development and ceremonial magic mechanisms within that system. So it is rare for a system to be solely focused on ceremonial magic or solely focused on internal power development. Systems will typically have a preference of favoring one form of development over the other. To give an example for Golden Dawn, that is very focused on ceremonial magic. They're less focused on internal power development.
So that's a really interesting comment. So maybe just so that we have an idea of what we're talking about, can you maybe describe the practice itself? Is that the way that you would like to proceed? Does that make sense?
I would like to go over the practice step by step of the middle pillar, yes. And what I wanted to do was use Mark Stavish's middle pillar as the structure to review the approach and the techniques. One point of theory I wanted to touch on before going into that was the nature of the psychic energy centers.
Okay,
And if you'd
perfect.
like to speak about
Yeah,
that,
let's
because
do that. And also just for clarity, and I'll include a link. We're speaking about the description of the middle pillar that Mark gives in Kabalah for health and wellness.
that is correct. Yes, specifically the elemental approach.
Right. And
And that, oh, go ahead,
so
Keith.
I was only going to say that as an aside, just for um, maybe just people that are listening's clarity. Mark is Regardi published a bunch of different versions of the practice, more or less complicated as he progressed. But the one that uses the elements the way that Mark does in Kabbalah for health and wellness is it's called the art of true healing, relaxation, the power of relaxation, something like that. I'll put a link to both of them in the description. But please, Nick, go ahead.
Yes. So one thing, and I'm grateful, Keith, that you described that there are different designs and approaches to the middle pillar. And people who have studied the different middle pillar techniques will notice that some of the middle pillar techniques use the Sephirotic correspondences for the different psychic energy centers, such as having Keter for the crown energy center, Da'at, which is the phenomenological Sephira, at the throat energy center, Tiferet for a heart or solar plexus energy center, Yesod for the pelvic energy center, and Malkut for, if the practice is done sitting, the perineum, or standing, the legs and feet. That is one approach. Another approach, and this is the approach that Mark Stavish favors in Kabbalah for Health and Wellness, is to give these different psychic energy centers elemental attributions. You know, spirit or spaciousness for the psychic energy center above the head, air for the throat, fire for the solar plexus, water for the pelvic energy center, and earth for the root or the leg energy center. And there can be questions that some people have studying these systems, how both techniques for activating the psychic energy centers can be accurate. There is a question, are these elemental energy centers? Are they Sephirotic energy centers? And how this can be reconciled. And I wanted to provide a metaphor for people to help understand how you can interrelate with your psychic energy centers. And what is useful to think of the psychic energy centers is to think of them as like instruments. You think of an instrument such as different types of percussion where you can strike a percussion instrument or a xylophone in a different way. And the way that you strike the instrument produces a different sound. That is what you are doing. If you do the middle pillar ritual and you use the Sephirotic correspondences, you are playing yourself like an energetic instrument, and you're playing the portions of these psychic energy centers that produce the Sephirotic energy resonance. If you do the elemental middle pillar ritual, these are the same psychic energy centers, and you are playing them with different notes. You're resonating with the elemental resonances rather than the Sephirotic resonances. So that was a point I wanted to make about the theory of the ritual before I went into the different portions of the ritual itself, as I know that can cause questions.
So interesting point, Nick. So when you speak that way, it makes me let me ask you this: is there a reason that we prefer the elemental version?
Yes.
So what is that?
To
Yeah,
answer your question,
yeah,
yes.
yeah.
The
So
reason why is the elemental attributions are more grounded.
okay,
And the reason why I say that, and I will elaborate further, is to give a contrast. The Sephirotic manifestations exist at a more mental level of your microcosm. They are more abstract and their energy is more ethereal. The elements, if you think of the tree of life as your system for understanding the nature of reality, the Empedoclean elements are dispersed from Yesod into the sublunar sphere and into Malkut. The elements exist through the descent of the tree and are most manifest at that level of reality between Yesod and Malkut. Chokmah is a fire sephira using the Hermetic Kabalah attributions. Binah is a water sephira that is accurate. The elements manifest most directly between Yesod and Malkut. So when you are activating the elemental resonances of these psychic energy centers, it is more easily established within your body to have this energy grounded in your body. If you're familiar with alchemy, you know one of the core concepts within alchemy is the spiritualization of matter. And that is one of the things you are doing when you do a power building exercise, such as the middle pillar ritual, is you are spiritualizing the matter of your physical body through the different levels of your energy body. And if you use the resonances that are more astral and more near physical, you can more directly spiritualize the matter of your physical body.
So that's really interesting. I was also thinking that one of the kind of goals on the path to being an adept is to have the the elements within you kind of organized, right? That's what the pentagram is a symbol of, right? Is the kind of mastery of the internal elements in the individual.
Yes, I did not intend to interrupt.
No, and that was my point. Just that
Yes.
this is kind of this is an important practice because it kind of has that basic aspect as well as a more developed aspect, or an opportunity for a more developed aspect. So Nick, so the next step. So we described the theory, we've described the different psychic centers and their attributions in the elemental system. And so then the next step would be to consider how we would perform the ritual.
Yes. And the first thing, if you would like me to begin describing the different stages of the ritual, I'm happy to do that.
Yes, please.
And the first stage is the preparatory stage, where you have flexibility in how you're going to set up the ritual space. For me, I do the middle pillar ritual as part of my evening meditation, and I will do Mark Stavish's Six Directions invocation prior to the middle pillar ritual to set up a state of elemental equilibrium. You can also use the lesser banishing and lesser invoking rituals of the pentagram to set up that space.
And
That is your preference.
that's also in Kabbalah for health and wellness.
Correct.
The six directions. Perfect.
Yes. And Mark gives other recommendations, such as the invocation of the tradition. What is critical is that you have a process that achieves a state of elemental equilibrium and grounds you in the sacred nature of the esoteric work you are doing, so that you're in a proper state of balance and mental equilibrium when you start to activate the psychic energy centers. Because when you're working directly with your psychic energy centers and circulating that energy, you will experience points where there is blockage and where there are challenges. And if you can be mindful and have spaciousness within yourself, you can allow the energy that you are circulating to dissolve those blockages.
Excellent.
If you have done the middle pillar ritual for a substantial period of time, you will likely notice there are certain areas where things flow smoother than other areas. And if you are noticing that, that is a very good sign, because that means the middle pillar ritual and the energy that you're circulating is very deeply grounded within you. So after you have established your sacred space and grounded yourself, the first stage of the ritual is the activation of the psychic energy centers. That involves the visualization, beginning with the center above the head, which I will use the elemental attributions, the spirit or spaciousness energy center, which is given in most systems an activation through a mantra, which is typically the vibration of a divine name. Typically, the center above the head is given the name Ehye. And one of the critical things to know about vibration is that when you are vibrating a divine name, you can think of your entire body your physical body, astral body, mental body, Akashic non-dual light as a tuning fork. And the entirety of your being is intended to resonate with the frequency of that divine name. And this is something that if you practice the vibration of divine names, you will understand what I'm describing, where you feel the entirety of your being becoming that divine name. You can think of each divine name as a handshake with the Creator, as each divine name is the Creator manifesting itself in a specific aspect in reality. So by vibrating that divine name, you're resonating with that energy and activating that corresponding psychic energy center. You then visualize a column of light, which can be a beam. Typically, the beam is white or a color that is nearly indescribable, descending from the psychic energy center above the head. And what I will mention is the psychic energy center above the head is typically given a visualization of being brilliantly bright. And if anyone has done work with the Sephira of Keter, what they will likely know is that this color is nearly indescribable. Frequent visualizations describe that the color is so bright that the center of the sphere is black. And that is because Keter's property is undifferentiation. That is Keter's nature. As Dion Fortune said, Keter is in Malkut. Keter contains everything, because Keter is undifferentiation. And that is why you draw energy from the crown, as this energy has no karma. It is pure potentiality. So it is bright to the point of nearly being indescribable. And that energy, and feel free to stop me, Keith, if you would like
Just
to ask me a question.
one thing that just before you move on, I thought the description you gave of vibrating the name was really interesting. And then we're vibrating the name when we're imagining the sphere or the psychic center, we're imagining our consciousness there, and
You
we're
can do
vibrating the
that.
name and the whole being is vibrating. Is that
There,
am I describing what you said accurately?
I have tried both techniques where I have tried projecting my consciousness into the sphere itself and staying grounded and totally aware of my physical body while being mindful of the space above my head. And my experience is to try both techniques and to be mindful of your journaling and to see how those different techniques resonate with you because they have different results. The consciousness projection technique has a more mental effect where you have the sensation of moving up an elevator or down an elevator within your inner being. That is more mental. If you focus on being grounded in your physical body and mindful of the locations of the psychic energy centers, that can have a more grounding effect, which can also be useful. And they train different skills because the consciousness projection skill that you use when you project your consciousness into the psychic energy centers is a skill you can use for other forms of esoteric work. So there are different
Both
merits.
excellent. Um, and then you just mentioned as a side, but I want to highlight the importance of kind of keeping track, making a record of what you've done and the what's happened, right? Journal, some kind of journal or diary is important. And um the Institute, of course, has them for sale. um but anyway, go ahead, Nick.
Yes. So you descend the light from the psychic energy center, which is typically a spirit energy center above the head, down through the crown of your head to your throat energy center. And this is the air energy center. And the elemental attribution of this center is air. And I will also mention that Mark has an article on the Institute website that gives the more mental descriptions of these psychic energy centers and what you can contemplate while doing the ritual if you want to have a mental component to the middle pillar ritual when you are doing the ritual, which is not a required component.
Excellent. I'll include that. And so that point they just made me one question: how long are we vibrating the divine name in each psychic center? How long are we spending in the spacious one? in Keter? How long are we spending in each center? How many times is there a number of divine name? How many times you vibrate the divine name?
I have seen systems that suggest doing multiple vibrations at each psychic energy center. My specific approach is to do one vibration that is conducted with a very deep inhalation, as that also utilizes breath retention and grounds you in your body. And doing a very, very long breath with a very long, prolonged vibration to be completely suffused in the vibratory quality of that name. And for resting in the spheres, that is based on how long you want to structure your practice. And something that Mark advises, and I can also second that this is an extremely valuable practice, is to think of each psychic energy center as an entire world, which they are. And you mentioned moving into the sphere with your consciousness. That is one of the things you can do is use these psychic energy centers for mental wandering, and they become doorways within your inner being to access the elemental realms.
Excellent. That's really interesting. Cool.
Yes.
Yeah, that's awesome. So then after the throat center is associated with
Which is
air.
Yehovah
Oh, the
is
divine name,
the
please.
vibratory name is Yehovah. And you then descend the energy to the solar plexus, which is Elohim, followed by the pelvic energy center, which is given the name El, which can be challenging in my personal experience to vibrate as it is a short name. And as an example of my own personal work, that is one of the things where it can be mindful to be, if you be, it can be good to know that if you encounter something that is challenging, to continue with persistence and diligence, finding the correct vibratory structure, and know with confidence that if you continue practicing that specific skill, you will develop the frequency. Your higher self will direct you to establishing that resonance that is going to vibrate with that name.
So excellent point. I think I remember Mark mentioning this in the question and answers, that you kind of learn the right tone to vibrate in, right? And you learn it's not so much getting it right, it's more getting it right for you
Yes.
in this instance.
One of the
So yeah,
reasons,
go ahead.
oh, I did not intend to interrupt. One of
Uh,
the reasons why Hebrew can be both challenging and very useful for esoteric work is specifically because the vowels are not written. And Jean Dubuis writes about this in his Kabalah oratory material, is that the vowels are not present in the script of Hebrew allows the esotericist to find their personal pronunciation because there is no prescribed vowels that pair with the consonants of the words.
oh, that's a really interesting point. Yeah,
Yes. So
excellent.
ale, when pronounced as a water resonance, for me, it is the ale of the sea, a deep resonance of the sea. That is different than if I were trying to resonate the word ale with the Sephira of Chesed, which is one of the other correspondences that the divine name Ale can be used to resonate with, is the Sephira of Chesed.
Really interesting point.
Yes.
So you've laid out all five psychic centers.
Adonai is the
Adonai,
earth energy
perfect.
center.
And um I so when I do it, I usually am sitting, but I have read the recommendation that before you sit, you stand for some period of time to kind of establish the centers. I don't know if you've seen that.
I have heard that the amount of time that I have spent doing standing middle pillar work is comparatively short relative to my sitting cross-legged, as I also incorporate Taoist esotericism into my esoteric work. And that involves a large amount of cross-legged sitting meditation. And I taught myself to meditate using Taoist techniques. So for me, that is more resonant with my practice. And when you're doing that, something that can be helpful is specifically for the earth center is it starts at your root, your perineum, and the entire sphere encompasses your legs. That entire sphere is going to be your earth energy center.
Excellent. And the size of the visualization of the psychic center, like you mentioned there that it's encompassing, but how does that work? How should we imagine the psychic
So
center?
the way Mark describes the psychic energy centers in Kabalah for Health and Wellness is accurate, where the psychic energy center itself, you want to have as small as possible because the correspondences for the psychic energy centers in the physical body are ganglion clusters within the nervous system. So they are very small. And the psychic energy center, if you can imagine the psychic energy center at approximately the size of a grain of rice, that is a good practice. And what you want to visualize is that that grain of rice-sized psychic energy center is manifesting the entire sphere, which then is an emanation of that center.
I see.
And that is again, and there are other practices within Taoist esotericism as an example that have to do with compacting and building and densifying energy. So if you can imagine this extremely dense, powerful psychic energy center being capable of emanating this entire sphere, you are grounding within your body both your sensation, your clairsentience, your ability to sense energy, and the sensation of these psychic energy centers and the reality of the power that they can generate. Because as I mentioned in the theory portion, it is critical to know that when you're doing the middle pillar ritual, you're doing a power building exercise to develop your internal power generation.
So that's excellent. Really interesting. So as an aside, Regardi apparently at one point when he was developing one of the I think it's actually the text he called the middle pillar, which has a really long kind of introduction about psychoanalysis. He was reading the Golden Flower, um, which has like an afterword by Jung. The translation was kind of done as like a Jungian project, but The Secret of the Golden Flower has similar internal alchemy. So it's interesting that you're thinking about it that way also. So Nick, we've established the 5 psychic centers. We vibrated the divine names. Just as an aside, I I I find what you're saying really interesting. I know that it is common, maybe even for in a person just starting to vibrate the name maybe more than one time because it gives you a chance to practice even getting better at vibrating the name. I don't know what you would think about that, but I usually
Yes,
do it 3 times, but I feel like that gives me a chance to, get it going a little bit and find the vibration that's really working, if that makes sense.
yes. What is critical is two factors. One is to allow your intuition, which is again your higher self instructing you, and to follow your intuition on what is going to help you perform the middle pillar ritual most effectively. And to also be comfortable with what you have described, which is that certain portions of the middle pillar ritual will take more diligence and more practice to actualize. And to do the middle pillar ritual with an understanding of that you will encounter these challenges and that you will dissolve the blockages that you're experiencing that create that challenge. It can be that you have a challenge resonating with a specific element, and that is why it is challenging to resonate that divine name properly. That could be an example of why you encounter a challenge.
Oh, so that's really interesting.
Yes. And it is also critical to know, and this is not something that, to my knowledge, is addressed in a number of texts on Western esotericism, that these psychic energy centers, when they accumulate blockages, they resonate with different types of emotional energy. So if you encounter a blockage at a specific psychic energy center, such as a challenge, getting the energy to descend from one center to another center, that is something to be mindful of. And that is something within your microcosm that you're in the process of dissolving. And it is good if you notice the challenge, because if you notice the challenge, that means you are in the process of dissolving that blockage.
So that's a really interesting point, Nick. And so two things I want to say. One, we're running out of time here, so maybe we'll do this in two parts. We have about 5 minutes left. So if that's okay with you,
And I
maybe
am
we'll have
happy
a
to
part
go
two
over if you would prefer, Keith,
to go.
in this recording. I did not know if you had something else after this. If
No,
you
I
wanted to
don't.
keep talking, I
Yeah,
can
I'd
keep
like to
talking.
I'd like to continue because we haven't even talked about the circulation of energy. So
Yes,
if
I'm
that's
happy to keep talking, Keith.
yeah, let's I have one thing to say about what you just said, and then maybe we could wrap this portion up and then we can start another session. I'll post
Okay.
a part two. Um One of the things I've been thinking about a lot lately, and it relates to this point that you're making. You have a psychic center that's presenting some sort of challenge, and you're working on that challenge during your practice time when you're meditating, but you're also, I think, um, it's beneficial if you're working on that in day-to-day life also, right? If you start to try to um work on that same problem even in your daily life. So to give you an example from my own life, I can be short. I get frustrated with people that are moving slow when I'm at work, right? Just for whatever reason, they're old or what, and so I'm trying to be more compassionate towards them, right?
This
But
sounds like a fire psychic energy
right, so
center
same problem,
blockage.
right? Well, maybe, or I have too much. I don't, but there's something that I'm working on that also might come up in meditation. Does that make sense? Like that there's a
And
correspondence between your life and
yes,
yeah, go ahead.
what you said is critical. You said your life, and something that people do not speak about in esoteric work enough, and I know this is something Mark Stavish is very mindful about, is your esoteric work integrates and catalyzes the other areas of your life. And as I mentioned, if you are working on dissolving blockages in different portions of your microcosm at different psychic energy centers, that is going to manifest itself in other areas of your life. So, anger or impatience are likely things that resonate with fire or air as an excess of fire or air, or a deficiency of earth, as earth is stillness. Ox brings patience, is one of the lessons of the Caribbean. So if you are working on those psychic energy centers, developing earth, regulating and balancing fire or air, you will become mindful of shortness, bursts of anger, and impatience in other areas of your life, because that is the Hermetic maxim of as within, so without, as above, so below.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. And I've noticed that it you think that you've worked out the problem, but it kind of becomes more refined and more subtle, and there's still, you feel like you've accomplished it, but then you're still a little bit impatient. There's always
Yes.
more
The
that you can
forces,
develop.
oh, I did not intend to
No,
interrupt.
go
What I
ahead.
will say, and this is not specifically relevant to the middle pillar and more about esotericism in general, is that the forces of initiation will find within you what is the fulcrum that they can grab within you. And then you become the adage of Archimedes' lever, where the forces of initiation, after they have found your fulcrum, will rotate your entire life upside down
Right,
through the
right.
solve et coagula process. So, where you are most volatile, where meaning where change can be catalyzed, that is where the forces of initiation will activate and catalyze.
Right, right. Interesting. And maybe a difficult spot for you personally. Yeah. Okay, Nick, let's pause here and we will regroup for part two. So I will put those promised things in the description box, and hopefully this was helpful to everyone listening, and we will continue in a additional recording. So I will see you in the next video.